Welcome to the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in critical times. Here's your host, Bill Kelly.
Welcome to another edition of the Bill Kelly Podcast, critical discussions in these critical times. I'm your host, Bill Kelly. It's good to have you with us today. There was a document that was released late last week that is probably one of the most important things that may or may not shape Canada's future, because it's certainly a roadmap for Donald Trump and his MAGA people to reshape not just North America, but the world. And first of all, it's called the National Security Strategy. Now, this is not new. Other presidents have done this in the past. Trump did one during his first administration. And this basically is I think a reflection of an awful lot of the stuff that we just put off as just the ramblings of a crazy old guy in the White House. This is their plan, and it's scary, and it should be scary. Now, to that end, because Canada is certainly going to be affected by this, I went through some stuff a couple of days ago. I said, okay, I want to find out, the Canadian perspective on this. So I went to the big three television networks, the ones that we're supposed to rely on to inform us what's going on. CBC didn't even have anything about this. Nothing. I went into the CBC, the search engine, the archive, and they've got a story from the National Security Strategy that released in 2022. Well, that's irrelevant now. Nothing about this one. Both Global and CTV, of course, had a story on it, but it was not their story. It was just a reprint of the American Newswire version of the story, so it's only slanted towards how great this is going to be for the United States. It's not going to be great for Canada, and we need to talk about this. And while our Canadian politicians seem to have their heads up their butts talking about this, that, and the other thing, and want to get this passed, and what about the pipeline, and what about the referendum, the United States is looking at us, not with envy, but with this salacious idea that, what's theirs is ours. And Trump has said that in the past, the 51st state things, and we just kind of put that off and said, he's not kidding. He's just, it's a joke. That's all. It's not a joke. It's right here. It's right here in the paper, this 33-page document that essentially says that the United States sees itself as the sole authority in the Western Hemisphere, and it intends to assert political, economic, and military influence across North America, across the Western Hemisphere, to claim that authority. And there are dozens of examples through this document that indicate that's exactly what they're doing. I know it sounds draconian, doesn't it? It does, because it is. And it sounds dystopian. I mean, all this stuff about, the Orwell 1984 stuff and everything, it's coming to pass. And it's right here in black and white for us to read. And this is not news, I guess, to some people, because Trump's been talking about this for the last couple of months, of course. But, now there's basically, as we mentioned, a roadmap for this to happen. When you look at what's going on here, it's really a reflection on what Donald Trump has been trying to do here for the last little while. Basically, the ambition here is to have the United States as the sole superpower in the world, because this document doesn't just talk about North America. It also talks about their influence in the Middle East, their influence in Europe, their influence in the South China Sea, and on and on and on. That's not new, of course. The policies about manifest destiny and the Monroe Doctrine that were instituted years and years ago have always touched on this. They've been rather dormant for the last little while. But the MAGA people, Donald Trump and his team, have resurrected these. As a matter of fact, they've refined them to a certain extent as well. The Monroe Doctrine kept other powers out. It basically said, Europe, Asia, whomever you are, stay out of North America. You have no influence, and you never will have any political or influence in what goes on in this country. Well, Trump has taken it to the next step and said, not only are they not allowed to have those influence, we want to make sure that the countries that are here, being Canada, Mexico, and of course what's going on in the rest of the Western Hemisphere, are under United States control. That's exactly what this document is talking about here right now. It plans to take over control of the hemisphere's resources, supply chains, and countries, including Canada, by the way, that we're in here right now. It's called the Trump Corollary, and they're quite definite about exactly what they're trying to do here, right? They want to make sure that we are beholden to the United States and only the United States, that our resources, our vast resources in this country, for instance, are essentially the property of the United States. And they go on to say, oh, no, we believe in your sovereignty. No, they don't. Canada, you can have your own government. You want to elect your prime minister and your members of parliament and everything. You go ahead and play your little game there. But fresh water will belong to the states. Those minerals and the Ring of Fire that we're talking about, those will be American property. Everything will flow to the states. The jobs will flow to the states. And we've already seen examples of this. Even this debate that's going on about the fighter jet purchases and the fact that, some of those parts are already being produced here in Canada. So maybe that's the better deal. We'll stay with our friends, because that's what we've always done, isn't it? Well, we'll side with the Americans, because you know what? They're our allies, and they'll give us a break someplace else. No, they won't. Not with this guy in charge, and not with the MAGA people running this. All jobs are going to the United States. Factory jobs, automotive jobs, whatever the case might be. They want to suck the resources out of Mexico and Canada and simply bring all the economic benefit to the United States. I know it's scary when you start thinking about this, but this is the plan. And Trump's going to do it with a smile on his face, I guess, so we're going to think this is okay. So when we have Mark Carney, who tells us in no uncertain terms that the relationship that we've had, the friendly relationship we've had with the United States for generations and generations, is over. He's not kidding. This has been going on, and perceptive people like Carney and others have been seeing this happening and seeing this developing over the last little while. And it's at the point right now where these guys want to move forward on that. And it's already started. I just mentioned the Ring of Fire and the minerals, the rich resource minerals in Northern Ontario, for instance. We already know that American companies are starting to buy into that. We've got to be careful about this. We keep talking about our sovereignty, and we want to stand on our own 2 feet economically, militarily, and in just about every other facet. These guys are trying to knock our feet out from under us, and it's a part of a very, very strategic plan here that they're talking about. And even though there's an economic argument to say, well, this should never happen, but it will happen if we let it happen. I think the one thing that the Prime Minister has talked about, and I think a lot of us have mentioned, and I've talked about on the podcast, and even going back to the radio show a number of years ago, is we can't be naive about this. I mean, and this is not an anti-American rant. It's certainly not. This is a realistic approach, and I think a realistic assessment of what's going on here. However good the relationships were with Canada and the United States in the past, and we've had our ups and downs, and that with neighbors you squabble sometimes. But we had the Auto Pact, we had the free trade deal, the initial free trade deal. We had the Acid Rain Treaty that Brian Mulroney and Ronald Reagan has signed on to. There have been some big victories here between the two countries, and a sense of cooperation on some key issues, and that's all well and good. And we fell behind in military commitments and things like that. That's all well documented now. But what's going on right now is Trump wants to make America great again. And I don't know how many times, if I had a buck for every time as I've read this 33-page document, where America First is mentioned. America First, not just between Canada and the United States, not just between Mexico and the United States, but they're talking about America First in Europe, America First right around the world. And they've done this assessment of some of the key areas in the world and how American dominance has to be the main factor there. Whether it's in the Middle East, and we've seen that happen, haven't we? Whether it's with Ukraine and the war that's going on there, American influence and American dominance, because America first. That's the whole mantra here for these people. And examples of this have already started. We already know that this attempt at a peace plan, for instance, for Ukraine to try to end that war is American-centric. As a matter of fact, it's Trump-centric. I mean, the two people doing the negotiation for the Americans, neither one of these guys have any qualifications at all. It's mind-boggling, but the whole thing is because they're really bargaining for Donald Trump. They've even talked about, first of all, Russia taking over whatever land they've already taken over in Ukraine. That's going to be theirs from now on. This is not about trying to maintain Ukraine's sovereignty at all. And they've also said that the American people, quote unquote, in other words, Trump and his friends, would be in charge of the reconstruction in Ukraine. Just as they said that the American people, Trump and his people, would be the leading force in reconstruction in Gaza when they finally get that sorted out. This is all an attempt for him to make millions and billions of dollars, I guess, not just for him and his family, but for others as well. I mean, it's about time that we just, saw through the haze that these guys are putting up here and realize that this guy is simply out for himself. He's not even out for America. I mean, the America First thing is really a bit of a scam too, isn't it? But we in Canada need to be, I think, cognizant of what's going on here. And we're not we're not dealing from a total position here of weakness. I mean, we've got to understand that we do have some strengths here. As a matter of fact, the things that they like about us are the strengths that we need to talk about here. You know, Trump has always said that, well, we don't need Canadian lumber. We don't need Canadian cars. Yeah, they do. Because we found that out this week, didn't we, during those hearings that are going on in Washington, where the American manufacturers, the overwhelming majority of people making depositions to this committee were American companies. They said, yes, we need Canadian softwood lumber. This is the home building industry down there. It's a better product. We want to build quality homes so they don't fall apart in a couple of years. We want Canadian softwood lumber. The auto industry, except for the workers themselves, who are a lot more militant, but the big three that have been so dominant in Detroit and in the North American auto industry said they want this trade deal to go through. They still want this cooperative back and forth between Canada and the United States with the auto industry. It said it was working. It didn't have it wasn't perfect. It had its imperfections, but it was working. You don't throw that stuff out. So those messages are clear. But we do have that. We do have resources here that we need to talk about. They do need Canadian oil. Now, he talks about being self-sufficient in oil. A lot of that stuff comes from Canada. Yes, it's refined down there. And what we need to do, and I know Prime Minister Carney has talked about this, and I think it's about time we started just acting on this instead of just talking about this, is we have to start doing more than simply making our raw materials available to other parts of the world, especially to the United States. We have to start building here. We have to start taking those raw materials, refining our own stuff from oil, LNG, things of this nature. We have to start building things again here instead of shipping them over. I mean, without trying to oversimplify it, I mean, what we've done here for generations is we extract minerals, we extract our natural resources, our valuable natural resources, and invariably we ship them out to other parts of the world and they make something out of them and then they sell it back to us. There's no wonder whether we find ourselves in a precarious situation. Start building the stuff here, and it can be done. And I think that's one of the things that Prime Minister Carney has been talking about for the last little while. And this also, I think, goes hand in hand with his commitment over the last little while to ensure that we build other alliances. And that's going to be something that we're going to have to deal with the consequences from Trump and others, because it's stated right here in this document again, in this national security strategy, with the Trump corollary, that they will discourage member nations in the Western Hemisphere, that's us, Canada, they will discourage member nations from dealing and making trade deals with other nations. You understand what he's saying here? This is the big boss here saying you will deal with us and us alone. We want your resources. Don't make deals with Europe. Don't make deals with the Asian countries. You deal with us. I mean, this is strong arming. And this is what these guys want to do. And we're not going to let this happen. We've got to elect, and we have elected leadership in this country that are going to stand up to them. You don't do it by shaking your fist in his face and saying, okay, let's go to war here. We can't do that, certainly. But what we are doing strategically is, I think, starting to look for divesting our resources and divesting of our trade responsibilities with other parts of the world. Even though this document here that was just released on Friday indicates that they don't want them to do that. They don't want Canada, nor do they want Mexico to start creating alliances, especially economic alliances, with other parts of the world. They want all the natural resources for themselves. It's like they want to just set us up here and just put an IV in there and suck every little bit of life out of us. And you can exist. You can still be Canada. You can still be Mexico. But everything that's of any value is going to flow to the United States for their economy. It's frightening that they've actually put this down on paper. Now, Donald Trump didn't write this. He's not smart enough to write something like this. As a matter of fact, he's not smart enough to read something like this, too. He may well be the most illiterate president in the United States history. But the people around him, the Stephen Millers and the other people of the MAGA organization, they're the architects of this. And they've been working on this for years. This is not something they just whipped up over the last couple of days. This has been their goal from day one, to simply gain control, not just of the United States, but of other economies, and especially of the North American economies. And to our credit, we were intelligent enough in this country to elect a guy like Mark Carney, who now is simply saying, I'm not going to allow that to happen. And he hasn't done it by confrontation. He's done it by, as he's told us, making those deals. When Poilievre starts criticizing Carney for being away and over for photo ops, he's signing deals. He's making pacts with other countries so that this sort of thing is not going to happen. Matter of fact, I'm looking at what's going on here and what the United States is proposing to do here to basically shut down other markets and basically isolate Canada and Mexico for the benefit of the United States. God help us if we had a guy like Poilievre as prime minister who'd simply acquiesce to this sort of thing. I mean, he's a MAGA guy. He's an advocate. He's a disciple of MAGA and the Trumpism, these sorts of policies. You know, when he said the other day, remember a couple of weeks ago, he said, if I were prime minister, he says, I would have a softwood lumber deal with the United States where we'd pay no tariffs. And I asked at that time, and after I look at this document, I'll ask it again, at what cost? What would he give up? Mineral rights? Oil rights? LNG for free for the United States? This is the sort of thing that we're dealing with here. And this is very, very serious stuff, not to be taken lightly. And first of all, I'm really ticked off that the Canadian media has not paid as much attention to this as they should, because this is something that could shape our economic future. And the fact that the major networks, of course, we've already talked about the fact that they already have right-wing influences anyway, especially the print media, which are owned by American entities. They want to downplay this. Sure they do, because they don't want anybody in the way of what Trump wants to do here. And we need people like Mark Carney and others to stand up for Canada in this situation. Now, there are some people that have taken the time, as I did, to read this document and get some understanding as to exactly what kind of influence this could have here. Arlene Dickinson, of course, well, you may know her, of course, from Dragon's Den, and a great successful business person and entrepreneur. She's commented on this as well. And she sees through the BS that's going on here, too. She writes in part in a Facebook post that she put on here. She says, look, we have strength. He says, the refineries are built for Canadian oil. We send them 4 million barrels of oil a day. Their Northeast is relying on our hydro. The minerals they need for batteries and defense sit in our Canadian ground. So we are essential to the United States economy, which is why we think, hey, let's make a trade deal here. Sure, you can have access to our resources, but you got to give us something in return. Instead of tariffs on our steel and aluminum and our softwood lumber, you've got a deal. There's got to be give and take. And what this document clearly states here is that they don't want a deal. They don't want to negotiate. They simply want to take. That's what the national security strategy is, to take. Yeah, Canada is rich in resources. We want to take those. And Trump said the 51st state, they don't have to make an official declaration. As long as they can continue to take and not have to give anything back, why should they stop? That's the manifest destiny that they're talking about. And it's pretty frightening right now. It's a coordinated plan to shape the hemisphere on American terms, as Arlene writes about in her piece. And it's coming directly from Washington. They want to make sure that policy is going to be, for Canada, and especially economic policy, is going to be dictated from Washington. That's exactly what they're trying to do here. And I know it's been pretty clear that that's what Trump has been talking about. But we've had people on this side of the border and on the other side of the political spectrum that have simply said, oh, come on, that's not really going to happen. Yes, it could, if we don't open our eyes to what's happening here and what Trump is actually trying to do and do something about it. And we can't go back, toe-to-toe with these guys, but we can do the sorts of things that Mark Carney has been talking about. Yeah, we do have to spend a lot more on military spending, not because we have to defend ourselves against the United States, but because we need to be more self-sufficient. That's all there is to it. Yes, we need to be more self-sufficient when it comes to mineral extraction and actually using those minerals. Build the damn batteries in this country instead of simply sending everything overseas or sending it across the border. Become self-reliant. And it's not going to happen overnight, but it has to happen. That's all there is to it. It just has to happen. We're looking for leadership at this stage. And when you look at this document, as frightening as it is, and you look at what our prime minister has been doing over the last 6 or 7 months, this is a guy that saw this happening and saw what was coming. And he's slowly but surely and very strategically making the moves that we need to make in this country and in this economy to try to make Canada less reliant on the United States. So this sort of thing doesn't happen. And this is what we need to keep in mind. Just about everything we say and everything we do here, especially when it comes to economic policy and defense policy, has to be cognizant of the fact that this is the ultimate goal. Read this paper. And I encourage everybody from elected office in Ottawa, both in all sides of the political spectrum, Liberal, NDP, conservative, despite the fact that so many people in the Conservative Party right now are big fans of Donald Trump. Read this document. If you truly believe about Canada, that this is the country that you want to be in and this is the country that you want to see flourish, then you have to understand that we have to change our attitude here and change our outlook. The document is itself. This is not conjecture. This is not fear-mongering. It's right here in this 33-page document. It's called the National Security Strategy. It's by the Trump administration, and it basically talks about how they want to extract just about everything from North America for their own particular good. And they reference historical, documents for this too. Under the subheading of securing access to critical supply chains and materials, they say we must resecure our own dependent and reliable access to the goods we need to defend ourselves and preserve our way of life, yada, yada, yada. Said this will require expanding American access to critical minerals and materials while countering predatory economic practices. Now, here's the rub. First of all, that means that they want access to what we've got up here because they don't have it and we do. And their whole thing about predatory economic practices, that's a determination that they say they will make. And that's what Trump's already done. Maybe Canada's not being fair. Yeah, it's the other way around. Canada is not being unfair to the United States. They're sucking us dry and getting all our resources. And Trump, of course, wants to try to characterize that as he's getting the bad deal. When he's talking about all the fentanyl that's going across the border, that's a lie. When he's talking about the fact that there's a huge trade deficit here and the Americans are getting ripped off by the trade deal, that's a lie. But it's the lie that, keep telling the lie, and people are eventually going to start believing that that's the truth. And that's what a lot of the MAGA people and the people that voted for this guy, the red-hatted people, that's just the gospel according to Donald Trump, and they believe it. We have to fight back. And the way we fight back is to become less dependent. It's a frightening document, but it's a document that we need to talk about and that we need to understand because this is I think the foundation. This is the bedrock for what Mark Carney's been doing now for the last 7 or 8 months and what he needs to continue to do for Canada's sake and for Canada's future. So for those that are still, beaking off about, he doesn't have a trade deal yet, you're not going to get a trade deal. Get that through your heads right now. There will be no trade deal that's good for Canada, not coming from the Trump administration. Maybe the first administration, because he didn't have the horses and he didn't have the support, because he had other people in the room that were saying you can't do that. That's against the law. You can't, there's going to be a consequence to that. Those people are long gone from the Trump administration. All he has now are sycophants and disciples that are going to kowtow to him and basically decide these policies. And it's the sort of thing that Canada has to be aware of. National Security Strategy. It's easily accessible. I picked it up, 33 pages, read it, and it's frightening. I mean, this is scarier than any Stephen King novel that you've ever read. But it's something that we as Canadians, need to be aware of and need to understand that our government, the Carney government, is doing what they need to do right now to ensure Canada's sovereignty, not just for today, but into the future. And that's what good government is all about. That's it for this edition of the podcast. Thanks, as always, for being with us. If you're on YouTube, great to have you with us. Please hit that notification bell so that you can pass this on. And thank you to the subscribers, too, doing some interaction with some of them online just a couple of days ago. Your support, your financial support and your moral support really helps us to continue to do this work and to do the kind of work on documents like this so that we can bring these stories to you and create a dialogue on what's really important to Canadians. And we do thank you for your support for that. Thanks, as always, to Madeline Kelly for the great work in putting the podcast together. And for you, please stick around with us, too. There's a lot more to come here. Until next time, I'm Bill Kelly. Stay in touch and stay informed.
Bill Kelly Podcast brought to you by Wizen's Law, personal injury lawyers. Listen, you didn't choose to get injured, but you can choose the right lawyer. Wizen's Law, 905-522-1102 or wizenslaw.com.